And so you would see that the three pastors today, we are all dressed in shepherds' clothing. It's a reminder that the angels revealed to the shepherds their very first Christmas, the greatest gift of Christmas, the great shepherd himself, including this crippled shepherd today. Because this shepherd played futsal with our youth and got injured by the ball, and so fractured my right wrist. But I will get better because the Lord is faithful and the Lord is good. And so we are thankful indeed for God's gift of the great shepherd during Christmas. But today, God is also giving us another present at this Christmas service, and that's the gift and the present of having our bishop preach to us today's word for Christmas. Many of you would know Bishop Emeritus Reverend Dr. Gordon Wong. He's been our bishop for the past 4 years, and before that, our track president for 8 years. And before that, he was teaching in Trinity Theological College as a lecturer for the Old Testament. And so he'll be very familiar with many of us. But today, there's something new in his title. He's now called Bishop Emeritus, because when a bishop retires, he can be conferred the Bishop Emeritus titus, and that's what he has been conferred with. And so we can now call him Bishop for life. And so he's our bishop. And so can I invite you to join me in welcoming Bishop Emeritus Reverend Dr. Gordon Wong, who will bring us God's word today.
Thank you.
Bishop.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Ben. Merry Christmas to everyone. I want to thank your pastor for the opportunity to be able to celebrate Christmas with you here at Toa Payoh Methodist Church. But I hope you know you're part of a bigger family, a bigger Methodist family in Singapore, also a bigger Christian family throughout the world, where people will gather together to celebrate Christmas. Although I'm no longer the bishop of the Methodist Church in Singapore, I'm sure our new bishop, Bishop Philip Lim, would want me to bring you greetings on behalf of all your sister Methodist churches in Singapore. So Christmas greetings to all of you, and especially to you. If you do not usually come to a church, whether Methodist or otherwise, if you do not usually gather together on a Sunday or at religious festival days in a church to read the Bible, we also wish you a very, very happy Christmas. Because the Bible tells us that God's wonderful Christmas present is not only meant for people who gather together and read the Bible and gather together in churches. Christmas is for everybody, regardless of language, race, or religion. And so I bring you Christmas greetings to one and all. The Bible tells us that Christmas is for everyone by recording for us the fact that some of the very earliest people who celebrated the first Christmas over 2,000 years ago, these people did not attend church. They did not read the Bible. Who were these first Christmas worshipers? They are popularly described as the three kings. But actually, the Bible, and it was read to us a little earlier, the Bible doesn't actually call them kings. And the Bible doesn't even say that there were only 3 of them. There could have been 3, or there could have been 2, but more than likely, there were many more than 3 persons in that group that traveled together across many miles from the east that first Christmas. In the Bible's version of the Christmas story, they are described as Magi. This is a Persian borrowed word, and it refers to people who studied the stars, what we might call astronomers or even astrologers. These people were usually thought of as being very intelligent and smart. Some of you will know the story of Daniel and his 3 friends. They were very clever people, and they were chosen to advise the king. And this same word, Magi, is used to describe the group of magicians, astrologers, and counselors that the king employed to advise him. And so the English Standard Version, which was read to us earlier, in Matthew 2, describes these Magi as being wise men. And they're probably correct to give that paraphrase, wise men. Because we too might describe astronomers and astrophysicists as being very wise people, very smart, very intelligent, scientific people who are able to study and the movement of all the stars. And so these were the wise men who came to celebrate Christmas. I like a cartoon that correctly understands these early Christmas visitors as wise men, but it makes a joke about the presents that they bring. 3 wise men, and not one of you bought chocolate? The joke, of course, implies that the 3 types of presents which the wise men brought were not very wise and not very practical or useful, and chocolates would have been nice. Similarly, there is another cartoon that reads, after the 3 wise men left, 3 wiser women arrived, bringing gifts of diapers, casseroles, and baby formula. Jokes aside, and to be fair to these original wise men or Magi, the gifts that they brought, gold, frankincense, myrrh, were probably very culturally appropriate ways of showing respect and honor to the child and his parents in that generation, in that time, that culture, and that era. The Bible invites us to consider what would be wise and culturally appropriate presents that we might be able to present today in 21st century Singapore. What presents will I give to the Christmas child this year? Now notice that the Bible also says that these Magi or wise men came from the east, verse 1. And since the word Magi is a borrowed Persian word, it is more than likely that these wise and intelligent Magi came from Persia, which was a long way east of Jerusalem and Bethlehem. And just in case some of you still use the old King James Version, let me quickly point out what Bible scholars now accept was a mistaken translation in that old version. Verse 2, in this old version, has the wise men asked, where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him. Many Bible readers in the past were confused by this translation because verse 1 had said that the wise men came from the east, which means if they saw the star, they must have followed it not in the east, towards the east, but they must have been moving west. Now, we now know that the Greek words in verse 2 do not mean in the east. That is a poor translation. The words actually mean in the rising. And so our modern English translations correctly have the wise men in verse 2 ask the question, we saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him. The wise Magi saw the star of this child rising, and so they headed west from Persia. They were from the east, and they headed west to bring presents in honor of this child. Today, we too in Singapore are like those wise men. We come from the east. We are from the far east. And so the Bible invites us also who are from the east to come and bring our presents to this Christmas child. So please do not think of Christmas as a Western religion, a religion only meant for people who live in the West. No. The earliest people in the Bible who celebrated the birth of Christ were from the East, not the West. And please do not think of Christian religion as something only for people who attend church and read the Bible. No. These Magi or wise men, they did not attend church. And if you ask them, they almost certainly would have said that they came from a Persian religious family background. They didn't read the Christian Bible. They read the stars. And they believed that the star of a Jewish baby was rising. And so they came to Jerusalem looking for this child. And after they had found Jesus and presented their gifts, these Magi, these wise men, they went back to their Persian homes in the east. This is the way the Bible story tells us that Christmas is not only meant for Jews or Christians to celebrate. Whether or not you are from the west or the east, the north or the south, whether or not you have read the Bible or attend church, the God of the Bible invites everyone to come and celebrate Christmas. The Christmas story here in Matthew chapter 2 also tells us about another set of men who also should have been very wise, but these so-called wise men, they did not live far away in the east. They lived very nearby to Bethlehem. They lived in Jerusalem, less than 10 kilometers away from Bethlehem. It's a bit like from Sengkang coming down to Toa Payoh. And verse 4 describes these people as chief priests and teachers or experts of the Bible. They knew all the right facts about Christmas. If you asked them, they could tell you the answers, where to find the Christ child. You could find him in the little town of Bethlehem. But the Bible story seems to imply that these Jewish wise men, these teachers of biblical law, they didn't bother to make the journey personally. They didn't bother to move from Sengkang to Toa Payoh to present any gifts at all to the Christmas child. Yes, they knew a lot about Christmas, but they did not personally celebrate it. And perhaps there are some modern chief priests and so-called teachers of the Bible, of the law, wise people, who also know a lot about the facts and traditions of Christmas, where Jesus is, where he was born, who his mother was, what Christmas means, etc. We may have all the right answers, and in one sense we may seem to be much closer to the Jesus of Christmas, but on the other hand, we still remain so far away. We do not draw close to Jesus because we never take that short journey, but very crucial journey from knowing things about Jesus to coming and bowing faithfully to Jesus. We know about Christmas, but we haven't yet celebrated the Christ of Christmas in our hearts. We haven't come to present our presence of respect and honor. I hope that this morning, all of us will make that short journey from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, and all of us will come and present ourselves to the Christ child. And if we do come, we will find many, many, many others who have come. People from the east, from the west, from the north, from the south, all celebrating the promise of a child who will help all of us know that God is truly with us. Immanuel. In addition to the wise men from faraway Persia and the Bible teachers living in nearby Jerusalem who are supposed to be wise, Matthew 2 also mentions a not very wise man at all. He was called King Herod. And the Bible tells the story of how this horrible King Herod ordered the massacre of innocent baby boys in Bethlehem who were 2 years old or less. But since God warned Mary, Joseph, and baby Jesus about this terrible massacre that was about to take place, this holy family fled like refugees, escaped the country, and left for Egypt for safety. This story is also found in Matthew 2 in the Bible, and a Sunday school teacher asked her Sunday school class to draw a picture of this story of Jesus and his parents going to Egypt, their flight to Egypt. Little Bobby came home from Sunday school and brought this picture home proudly to show it to his dad. And Dad smiled when he saw the title, Jesus' Flight to Egypt. And Bobby had drawn a plane and with the Holy Family inside the plane. The dad said, "Well done, Bobby. I can see that this woman carrying the baby, that must be Mary, Mother Mary, holding baby Jesus. And the man right next to her must, with the beard and all, that must be Joseph, right?" Yes, Daddy. Do you like it? I do like your picture, Bobby, but who is that other person in the plane? Bobby was upset at his father's ignorance. Dad, how could you not know? That's Pontius the pilot. Little Bobby may have got the Bible's different stories all mixed up. But the point about flying away, fleeing away from Bethlehem to Egypt is correct. We didn't read those verses this morning, but in Matthew 2 and verse 16 onward, we are told that King Herod ordered the killing of all baby boys less than 2 years old in the Bethlehem area. What power, what insecurity and madness would make him carry out such violent acts of destruction against innocent and helpless civilians and families? But the Bible's point is clear. That very first Christmas story was not a peaceful story. It was a very tragic and painful story for the people of Bethlehem. It was not an idyllic sense where everybody is happy and smiling, Yuletide carols being sung by a fire and folks dressed up like Eskimos. You've heard that nice Christmas jingle. Everybody knows a turkey and some mistletoe help to make the season bright. But there was no turkey and no mistletoe in the Bible's story about the first Christmas. Instead, there was the darkness of death in a little town called Bethlehem, where so many baby boys were senselessly murdered. Sadly, tragically, Christmas 2024 will also be as sad and as tragic as it was that first Christmas 2,000 years ago. Senseless killings at a German Christmas market. Senseless shootings at an Abundant Life Christian school. Bombs and missiles across Ukraine, Russia, Gaza, Israel, Lebanon. Many, many families will be mourning in grief this Christmas, whether through war or floods, cyclones, famines, fires, blood clots, cancers. So what is there for anyone to celebrate at Christmas? Why should anyone celebrate Christmas when there are so many dark and terrible things that are happening in the world? The Bible offers several answers to that very important question. Today, let me mention only one answer given to us in the Bible in Matthew chapter 1. And if some of you were here celebrating Christmas Eve in church, you would have heard this answer in the Bible promise in chapter 1. The Christmas child is called Immanuel, God with us. The Christmas child, Jesus, represents God's very presence with us. Why is God's presence with us worthy of celebration? Let me offer an answer by way of two stories. The first is one I've told, I think, a few years ago here in Toa Payoh. I tell it again, a story that took place over 45 years ago. In those days, there were not so many MOE rules regarding what a teacher could or could not do to punish students. And one of our teachers loved to punish us by making us get up and do 10 push-ups. So a few of us agree that if any of us was punished in this way, the rest of us would voluntarily get up and do the push-ups also. Another teacher punished us by making us stand on the chair. We agreed we would all get up and stand on our chairs in solidarity with our classmate who was being shamed. And this somehow made the shame and the punishment a little less painful for the naughty boy. Now, my apologies to you teachers. I do not tell this to encourage our students today to be rebellious and cheeky. But I cite this as an illustration of how, if there are others also suffering and being shamed together with us, it makes it a little easier to cope with the suffering and the shame. It doesn't remove the suffering and the shame, but it helps us to endure it. We do not suffer alone. Here is a second story that illustrates why the presence of God suffering with us is something to be thankful for. Clevis Shima, he runs a restaurant just downstairs from where I live. Life was desperate, he says. He remembers how his beloved mother died from cancer when he was only 14. How he and his brother had to resort to stealing bread just to feed their hungry stomachs. Then in 1995, civil war in Albania forced many people to try and escape the violence that spread throughout the country. The two brothers tried to escape firstly by getting on a speedboat. It was unsuccessful. It was a very dark and dangerous time in a small speedboat in the night. 45 desperate people crammed into one boat, chased by police boats, tossed around by the waves. The police brought them back to Albania. But the brothers' second attempt was successful. He and his brother managed to escape to Italy. But there in Italy, they had to live on cold streets and train stations until the Italian police caught up with them and put them in a shelter or home for homeless kids. More details of his harrowing experiences in those homes are also captured in his testimony, which was published by Salt and Light. I was struck by what Clevis said about those dark and dangerous days. And he felt this even though at that time he was not yet a Christian. He hadn't read the Bible. He didn't go to church. But somehow, he says, he believed that God was there at every step that I took. All the people who helped me were sent by God. I was never alone. No matter how difficult life was, God had always been there for me. Christmas tells us that God will always be there with us in the midst of earth's sufferings. The God of Christmas, the God of the Bible, is a God who suffers with us. Is there anything worse than suffering? Surely the answer is yes. Worse than suffering is suffering all alone. When we suffer and nobody seems to see or care or understand our agony, that would be so much worse. But Christmas assures us that Jesus understands, that Jesus cares, and Jesus suffers with us. The Christmas child, Jesus, is a promise that God suffers with us the frustrations and despair and unfairness of life. This is one of the reasons we celebrate Christmas. Jesus promises us that when we suffer, we are not alone. He is suffering with us. Jesus' presence does not remove our earthly suffering and problems. No. But Jesus' presence helps give us strength and courage to endure that suffering. It helps to know that someone is there suffering by our side. What kind of strange God is this who suffers and cries and dies with us? In our culture, we think that suffering and crying is a sign of weakness and helplessness. Many people in our world would find the idea of a God who suffers, a God who cries, a God who dies, would find that a very foolish concept of God. Not a strong God, a very weak God. Why should anyone believe in a weak God who does not seem able to remove the suffering in this world, but instead himself suffers and dies in the world? But friends, this is the God presented to us in the Christian Bible. A God who is portrayed as a man dying on a cross. A God who is portrayed like a little lamb that has been slaughtered. This is the God of Christmas, the God who promises to be with us always, even in our suffering. And although this kind of suffering God might seem weak and foolish even to some people, many other people have found divine strength and hope by putting their faith in this God, by believing in this God. Strength and hope enough to cope with life's many, many agonies. And perhaps this Christmas day, some of us, all of us, will believe again, believe in this God, and find that same strength and hope. What present shall we bring to Jesus this Christmas? The wise men from Persia, from the east, they brought gifts of honor and respect. The nearby priests in Jerusalem, they gave answers, intellectual answers, but they did not give their hearts to Jesus. And the insecure and fearful Herod, he gave terror and violence. What present will we give? And actually, the Jesus whose birthday we celebrate at Christmas, he wants to be the one to give us a present. He wants us to receive the present or the gift of believing faith. A gift which Clovis Schema received when he was suffering in Albania and Italy. The gift of believing that there really is a God who is with us here in all our suffering. He is standing with us. The gift of believing that even in our darkest nights, the presence of God is with us. Immanuel. And God's light will continue to shine in our darkness. Will we believe this Christmas? There is a very old song that expresses this type of belief. And as I sing it, I pray that all of us will open our hearts again to receive this gift, this present of believing that even when the night is darkest, God's light and God's love are and always will be with us. I believe. I believe for every drop of rain that falls, a flower grows. I believe that somewhere in the darkest night, a candle glows. I believe for everyone who goes astray, someone will come to show the way. I believe. I believe. I believe. I believe above the storm, the smallest prayer will still be heard. I believe that someone in the great somewhere hears every word. Every time I hear a newborn baby cry or touch a leaf,
or see the sky, then I know why I believe. This Christmas, may God give and may each of us receive the gift of believing that He is with us always. Whatever happens in 2025, God loves you and is with you. Amen.